This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. What's up, Wisecrack? Greg here, ready to have a most resplendent time talking about a film with the best dialogue in the history of cinema.
Who's he?
He's Billy the Kid.
He's famous, dude. Let's bag him.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is frequently dismissed as a silly teen flick about two stoner-ass metalheads who would literally rather do anything than go to school. But what if it's secretly a genius film about the radical power of learning?
No way. No way.
Well, maybe wait, dude. Maybe wait, dude. Let's find out if Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is deep or dumb. We swear it will be. Non-heinous. Or maybe the opposite. Anyway, spoilers and a most triumphant time ahead. But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. A VPN is a virtual private network that encrypts your web traffic so you can protect your passwords, photos, and private messages online. Surfshark is simple and easy to use, and it doesn't slow down your internet speed unlike some other VPNs. You can also use it on any device so you're protected no matter where you go. Surfshark isn't just a VPN, it also offers additional features like Clean Web, which blocks ads and malware that may pop up while browsing. Their other feature, Blind Search, protects your browser from serving you targeted ads or sponsored sites. If you use the link in the description right now, you can get Surfshark VPN for 85% off its normal price, plus 3 extra months for free. Go to surfshark.deal/wisecrack or click the link in the description. Protect yourself online and download Surfshark VPN today. Now back to the show. Now, a quick recap. Bill and Ted centers on two pleasant metalheads, remarkable only in the fact that they are the future saviors of the world. Except right now, they're about to flunk history, which will get young Keanu Reeves sent to military school.
If you fail history, you flunk out of school. You know what that would mean, don't you, Ted?
That I would have to go to Oates Military Academy.
And destroy the duo's sick band.
Wild Stallion!
Their only means of salvation? Give a killer oral report on an apparently random assortment of historical time periods. Just when all hope seems lost and Keanu might have to open a book, a guy named Rufus from the future shows up with a dope time-traveling phone booth. They use it to kidnap historical figures, bring them to the present, and ace the out of that presentation. As a result, our dudes are on track to save the world so long as they can learn to play their instruments first. The end. So could this time-traveling stone affair possibly be deeper than the soulful eyes of one Mr. Reeves? We got 2 arguments to throw at you. Here's number 1. Bill and Ted might be all about the failures of Western-style education. It's no secret that these dudes do not care about their own learning.
Uh-oh, we're late. For what? For school, dude.
The classroom is presented as a place where facts are to be memorized and regurgitated. Not only is this a very boring way to learn, it's also a really big societal problem. According to educator and philosopher Paulo Freire and his banking concept of education, Freire argued that the Western education functions under the premise that the teacher knows everything important, and the student functionally knows nothing. Education is therefore something to be given from the teacher to the student, deposited like coins into your dumb old piggy bank of a brain. According to Freire, the result is that the scope of action allowed to the students extends only as far as receiving, fouling, and storing the deposits. This is visible right away in Bill and Ted's, where we see the chalkboard of a social studies classroom filled with a short list of historical time periods, waiting to be systematically deposited into these impressionable minds. Bill and Ted's teacher doesn't ask them to argue about the possible causes of World War I or theorize if powder wigs were good for headbanging. He asks them to recite admittedly very simple facts.
Who was Joan of Arc?
Noah's wife?
Freire, who spent his life educating impoverished, disenfranchised folks in Brazil, believed the banking model to be inherently oppressive, treating students like adaptable, manageable beings. You fill someone's brain with random facts and make sure that they don't have the will or ability to think critically about those facts. And from there, you don't have to worry about anyone changing the world, whether through a mass protest movement or weirdly influential metal band. If this is a problem with normal school, it's certainly dialed up to 11 in military school, an institution built to teach kids to shut up and listen to authority. And fittingly, it's the prospect of Ted leaving Wild Stallions to become a cadet, mindlessly doing burpees, that threatens the very rad utopia that our boy Rufus was sent to protect. But how do you overcome the drone-minded nature of education banking? According to Frary, you do so by becoming an active participant in your learning. Specifically, Frary believed in the power of problem-posing education, in which the teacher enters a dialogue with the students, rendering all participants jointly responsible for a process in which all grow. Kind of like a teacher who encourages you to argue with them about George Washington's farewell address instead of quizzing you about what year he crossed the Delaware. And problem posing seems at least a bit similar to what's happening between Rufus and Bill and Ted. They're not two dum-dums for him to fill with information. He approaches them with reverence and respect. Although, admittedly, my guy is in a real weird spot, because he both has to help them and worship them as saviors of the world. Rufus shows them the time machine, teaches them how to use it.
That book will give you the number of any place you want to go.
And explains its implications.
These are the circuits of history, gentlemen.
He even gives a little historical background.
Austria, 1805. The French have just invaded.
But then he leaves them to their own devices.
Gentlemen, you're on your own.
Bill and Ted now must pursue a more active educational model, essentially rounding up a crew of historical figures to become their substitute teachers. Along the way, they creatively solve various issues they encounter, ranging from broken antennas to figuring out how to get in touch with the medieval babes of their dreams.
How are we gonna meet him?
Key to the problem-posing educational style, Frary said, is communication. As he put it, authentic thinking that is concerned about reality, does not take place in ivory tower isolation, but only in communication. By communication, we can only hope that Frary was imagining this glorious exchange our boys have over Socrates' writing just before meeting him.
The only true wisdom consists in knowing that you know nothing. That's us, dude.
What's more, Bill and Ted immediately enter a dialogue with Socrates, or
Socrates.
sharing their own wisdom gleaned from growing up in the 80s.
All we are is dust in the wind, dude.
Dust. Wind.
Dude.
Which appropriately blows this Athenian's mind. Over the course of their journey, instead of simply memorizing Joan of Arc's name, they'll learn about her youthful achievements. Instead of memorizing Sigmund Freud's theory of the Oedipus complex, Ted undergoes analysis by the good doctor.
Whoa.
Perhaps most importantly, Bill and Ted are empowered with the knowledge that they have a tremendous effect over history. They are our saviors, after all. This notion of a student's active role in the making of history couldn't possibly be more antithetical to the feeling you get when memorizing facts about Alexander the Great. As Frary put it, problem-posing education trains students in the art of how to see the world not as a static reality, but as a reality in process and transformation. While Frary was talking about empowering people to think they could change the present or their own circumstances, this film literalizes that idea by making Bill and Ted actually capable of changing the future. As they learn how to control the forces around them and harness that power to help them achieve their goals, you can almost see what Frary calls the emergence of consciousness and critical intervention in reality.
After the report, we'll time travel back to 2 days ago, steal your dad's keys, and leave him here.
In a weird and perhaps slightly metaphorical way, Bill and Ted are taking charge of their own education and along the way, discovering their own agency and even learning some things.
He is sometimes known as the father of modern thought. He was the teacher of Plato, who was in turn the teacher of Aristotle, and like Ozzy Osbourne, was repeatedly accused of corruption of the young.
Now, when I first heard this idea, I thought, oh hell no, come on. This movie is dumb as hell. And maybe it's a stretch to compare Stoner Bros the kids rising up against the government in South America. But I gotta say, I'm pretty convinced on this one. So convinced, I'm gonna rate this argument pretty damn deep. But now we gotta get to the real wild stuff. Argument number 2. Here's the pitch. Not only is this movie about the failures of our education system, but it's also an exploration of the shortcomings of the written word itself. Damn, I feel attacked. All right, to get to the bottom of this, we need to look at the dichotomy between an oral versus a literary society, i.e. one dominated by what comes out of your mouth hole or is received by our ear holes versus one dominated by what you read via your eye holes and write. Bill and Ted begins in the modern world, where the written word reigns supreme. We're a literary society through and through, but they are punished for their refusal to, read and learn fixed facts about history correctly, thus leading them to imminent academic failure. However, Bill and Ted are the absolute embodiment of a burgeoning oral culture, giving their tendency to communicate via song and music, even when discoursing with futuristic weirdos. According to scholar Lynn Lundquist, the way history functions in an oral versus literary society is critical to understanding Bill and Ted. In a literary society, Lundquist explains historical narratives are fixed, rigid, and unchangeable. After all, you can't change the printed word. In an oral society, where storytellers can adapt each story as song to suit their audiences, myths reign supreme. Like how Homer's Odyssey is likely a combination of several different enduring stories told from generation to generation in ancient Greece that eventually got written down. What's more, oral societies tend to be more equal because, as Lundquist explains, the written word was historically weaponized by the powerful to deny rights to the illiterate masses. In contrast, oral traditions like folk songs or folklore are accessible to just about everyone. Maybe it's a weird coincidence, but just about every literary society we visit in Bill and Ted is violent and cruel, while oral-based societies like Athens are presented as peaceful and idyllic.
It was most tranquil.
And also, fittingly, they kidnapped Socrates, who was one of the last philosophers of ancient Greece that we know of to communicate solely through oral tradition. He also famously feared that reading and writing would cause the downfall of civilization. The only reason we think we know what kind of stuff Socrates said is because his student Plato wrote a bunch of it down. In keeping with this, Bill and Ted seem to epitomize the egalitarian nature of an oral society. When cramming for their tests, they solicit the conversational anecdotal help of various patrons of the Circle K, in keeping with classic oral learning.
The lady in that car over there said that Marco Polo was in the year 1275.
And critically, their teacher, perhaps sensing their resistance to literary culture, throws our boys a bone and offers them the chance to pass via a dope oral presentation. Frary might extra appreciate the fact that this presentation is structured around the idea of communication and critical thinking. Bill and Ted must explain what various historical figures might think and say about their present-day world.
He loves San Dimas.
Which brings us to the other primary tension, myth versus history. Whereas the history they learn in school is fixed and rigid, made up of dates and hard to memorize facts, Bill and Ted's ahistorical mission to bring figures of the past into the present is the very stuff of myth-making. By collecting Joan of Arc, Napoleon, and crew, Bill and Ted are tearing apart the history that our literary society is so obsessed with. Sure, they absorb actual facts along their interactive history lesson.
Nah, just got a minor Oedipal complex.
But they also use this new knowledge to draw ahistorical comparisons.
A time when much of the world looked like the cover of the Led Zeppelin album, Houses of the Holy.
They even call Socrates the Ozzy Osbourne of Athens, underscoring what Lundquist calls the collapse of historical context, taking place in favor of a more mythical style, less concerned with literal truth. What's more, as Lundquist explains, Bill and Ted's myth-telling, unlike rigid history, can be customized to fit their audience of San Dimas high schoolers, nowhere more fittingly than in this moment.
Be excellent to each other and
Party on, dudes!
The evidence of Bill and Ted as champions of an oral society is telegraphed when we see the future, a place that has been changed by the power of Bill and Ted's music, where the words they have said in the past have been carried down across generations.
Later.
Now, I'm not entirely convinced, but Lundquist has more. She argues that the film's sequel, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, further champions oral society. Bill and Ted have apparently established a university where students learn orally via headphones and through interactive lessons with historical figures. What's more, the movie's villain, who wants to change history and dethrone Bill and Ted as the world's saviors, outlines his diabolical plan in a book. A book that he makes people read and calls The New History. Once again, literary society is clearly the enemy of our favorite metalhead duo. Now, it pains me a little bit to imagine a society where literature doesn't matter, but I gotta give it to Lundquist, man. The all versus written society bit is a little convincing. I'm not saying that Bill and Ted is intentionally saying all this. However, we do think that the series maybe inadvertently makes a most excellent argument about the power of active empowered learning in primarily oral societies. At the same time, it majorly champions the power of myths in helping us better understand the world and our place in it, whether we're the saviors of humanity or not. And so, in our final moments, is Bill and Ted deep, or is it as dumb as an infinite loop of Keanu Reeves saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa"? I'm going to outrage your 10th grade American history teacher and rate this take on this film surprisingly, incredibly deep. But what do you guys think? Has Wild Stallions rotted our brains? Or is there really a lot more going on in this film than first meets the eye? Let us know in the comments. As always, huge thanks to our patrons for all your support. Slam that subscribe button like it's a portal to the future. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.